So it is finally time for us to do a tier list. I've played over 30 hours of Illuvium PvP, and right now I'm going to go through, I'm going to structure all of these Illuvials based on how well I think they're doing in PvP, how good they are, and if you should consider using them. So the three main criteria I will be looking at for this video are mastery cost, synergies, and the current meta. Okay, so with mastery cost, there's a lot of 100 cost Illuvials and things like that, but you're like, are they really worth the hassle of that? How well do they scale into late game, and are they going to be usable in their current form? The other thing is synergies, where I'm going to look at if it has Earth and it's really bulky Illuvial and it wants to be tanky in the meta, then that's going to be bode really well for it, especially if it's cheap to use. But like, I want to see how well the synergies line up with the Illuvial themselves, or how well the synergies line up with the team composition that it wants to make up with. So, right, so like a fighter with water is not particularly good because waters want to cast their Omega a lot, and fighters simply want to attack a lot. So it's not a particularly strong combination. But that being said, fighters might work really well in a combination with other things that want to cast a lot. And so granting the water synergy there is good as well. So there's all these sorts of things I am looking at. The other thing is the current meta. It's currently dominated by a lot of air. There's quite a few rogues and some fire. And then you've got your hyper carries, things like Phosphorus and really big casters like Ramfire, right? So this meta is really defining because it's a bit anti-empath as well. There are a lot of empaths running around, but I am going to be judging these Illuvials a little bit based on things like, can they deal with empaths quite well? Can they deal with Ramfire well? Or at least, do they survive long enough to not get knocked out by one Omega or like a dual F or something that's really efficient in this current meta game? So I'm going to be taking a look at that as well. And without further ado, let's reshuffle the cards and let's get into it. So first we start off with Atlas. Atlas is actually really, really solid right now, okay? So it's a Bulwark Water, which means it has good water regen, good defense, and its shield is really great. And since it regens so fast, it gets up the shield really often, which can explode and deal damage as well. Atlas is a solid pick, especially for 30 cost. It's one of the best Bulwarks in the game. Next up, we've got Axon. He just doesn't feel as good. Harbinger is not that good of an ability, to be honest. And he just feels too expensive compared to Atlas, really. And that's all there is to that one. So Axon is going to go in B because he's still a solid water, if he wasn't water, he would probably be a lot lower, but he is. Axon still feels a little bit too expensive. He's definitely better than Axon. But again, he suffers from that problem where he just wants to be water. Like Tsunami's a great thing, and just 7 water just performs a lot better than something like a Tsunami, where you want to be putting water together with invokers and casters and things like that. So a tanky water Illuvial just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Ramphy, look, Ramphy's good. I'm going to put it high on B. Ramphy's good, but Ramphy is not that good. Its Omega just doesn't do enough damage for 50 cost. It's pretty good because Fire Rogue is one of the best combos in the game right now. So that's really the only reason it's up there. Ram Fight feels a little bit underwhelming. It's got Phantom, but it really needs the Inferno to do all that damage. I'm going to chuck it down and C. It's just not as good as Ramphy. Because since they don't pair up particularly well, because they're not going to stack the fire, you would rather take Ramphy every single time. So I'd put Ramfight down here. Ramfire is definitely going up in S. You just equip the Ranger, you give it the Phantom Inferno, and it does crap tons of damage. What's even better is it pairs really well with all the energy gaining augments and things like that. So if they ever nerfed that, or if they ever made energy gain even harder to accomplish, it's already a little bit tricky against air, but it's not that bad. If they made that harder to accomplish, Ramfire would be lower, but it simply deals too much damage with its affinity bonuses, and it's going to become even better as they change up the game a bit later as well, and they add in some of the other Illuvials with Inferno. So next up, we've got Riptor. I don't know how to put this. So Riptorus is going down low. I think Riptor can stay next to Ramphy, and Riplance I'm going to put above Ramfight. And I'm going to start taking these in threes. That makes a lot more sense to me. Riptor is really good, 40 cost for the water affinity. And he simply just attacks his target and deals a decent amount of damage, but he attacks quite frequently with his Omega. And being Fighter is good too. Fighter is one of the best classes in the game. So, but Riplance and Riptorus, they had this really weird issue where they want to go into a toxic deck and fill out that toxic affinity bonus, but the problem is that they're really squishy. Now, they can do okay damage. They don't do enough to warrant putting them in there. Maybe I haven't seen people put the right augments on them yet. But every game I've seen, I've played against them, I just destroy them before they get to do anything. They just die too quickly in a deck that wants to be super tanky, and it just doesn't work. So Dash, Rake, and Umbre. Umbre is going to go top of A, and Dash and Rake, I think, are going to go... I think Rake's going in D and Dash is going in C. Dash, although it's water and rogue, which are two good things, they don't work together on their own particularly well. And Rake, just, it's steam and rogue. It needs to be water and Slayer, which would have been a whole lot better, so it just doesn't do as much. But the big issue they actually have is they're just too expensive. So Umbra's really good price for what you get, but Dash and Rake are a little bit too squishy. Umbra and this line works really well when it can cast often, because it does really great. It hits low health enemies and inflicts wound and all the rest of it. So them casting often is really effective, but they just can't accomplish that when they're too expensive and they're a little bit too squishy. And that for that reason, they're not too great. Archie is really underrated. Arcos, it just isn't that good. And Arcalion, I really haven't seen people play it a lot because Verdant is just not that strong right now. So I'm going to chuck them both down the bottom. Maybe they could be going... maybe I'm wrong there, but Archie is really good for its cost. You're going to see a lot of low-cost Illuvials make it high up on this list. So when a high-cost one does, really respect it. But Archie gets up there. Empath Nature, obviously the best combo you can have for both of them, but at the 30 cost, it does a lot of healing. It's a little bit tricky to protect, but if you can, it can actually absolutely pay dividends. This one's really interesting. I don't know how to judge Verminio very well. I have a feeling it's definitely better than Riplance. Vermi is quite good, but it's... I think Axon might need to go lower. Simply put. So Vermilia is quite good. It's just a little bit too expensive. The 40 feels weird when you've got all the Atipo empaths at 25 and it's not that much better than them. It's not 15 mastery points better at least. Vermilia I really like. It's just really hard to fit in a lot of decks. So I'm going to chuck it behind Vermilia here. Vermilia is really good at disabling enemy backline healers and mages and all the rest of it because it reduces their energy gain with its Omega and does some really great AoE stuff, but it can't out damage healing. It can just stall and slow down the healing for the rest of your team to do well. The problem is that at 75 cost and Spore, it doesn't fit into a lot of your heavy damage dealing teams particularly well. So it's a little bit hard to pull off, but I have used it as a tech add into some of my teams, and it does surprisingly well. And Vermi's just great at sitting there and not dying, I'll tell you that much. So Scarok is going to go down the bottom here. During survival mode, it was quite big. Goliath, I'm actually going to put low down here, but Titanol is going to stay up high. And I'm going to put it just above Archie. So Scarok and Goliath are just too expensive. They're tanky, but they're not tanky enough. They're not like uber tanky. They're just too expensive to get on the board. Scarabok's better than Goliath because it has the earth and you can tank it up with the earth. But the granite on Goliath, granite is just not that good. Like, it's decent. With some really careful positioning, it's okay. But there are augments that give you granite for free. And so you can't place those augments on these Illuvials anymore when it would really benefit them. And so it just feels weird. But Titanol's Omega hitting the furthest away enemy and doing some great stun. And it has Colossus as well, which is one of the best classes in the game right now. So these two don't have that, and it does. So Titanol, even though it's expensive, it can be very hard to remove. It can stall quite well, and it pairs up with some other Illuvials quite nicely as well. So I don't know where to sit with these. I've seen Kukulus. This gets really awkward because Kukuraf and Kukulus are both Enchanter, which is a really great class. I had someone play it against me today. It didn't do particularly well. Kuka at 30 cost is just plain good. Similar reasons to Archie. And it can stun an enemy for quite a long time, like 4 seconds or something ridiculous. It can just lock an enemy in that stun and they can't do anything, which can be really helpful against certain compositions. Things like a big fighter or a big win condition in their front line, like a Riplance. It would destroy a Riplance. And Kukuraf and Kukulus, they're okay, but they're just not good enough. They're just not cutting it. They die a little bit too quickly. And you have to put it in a really specific team. In like a flat air dodge team with a lot of empaths. And simply put, that's not that strong right now. A lot of fighters and a lot of fire will just take them out like it's no tomorrow. So they don't really thrive. I'm actually going to put them behind Verminio. Okay. So Adore, I haven't seen it see much play. The healers are getting shafted a little bit here. And a Dorito is just simply too expensive to play properly. Adorius is still decent, but I'm still going to put it at the bottom of B. Because it's a little bit hard to get off. They're just, rogues are so dominating in the meta. And there's a lot of ways to remove healing and remove energy use from air and other augments. But when Adorius does work well and you can protect it enough, it can heal and keep your team alive if your opponent just doesn't have enough DPS. So it's still really good. It's just really hard to pull off in this current meta. So Flare I'm putting down right down the bottom. Singe and Seer are both pretty solid. They're definitely not better than Axon. And Riptor might need to go below them. Singe and Seer, Magma is actually pretty solid. It's not the best affinity by any means, but they both have Magma. Singe gets Bulwark, which is also really neat. The problem with Singe, it's a little bit too expensive. Otherwise, it would probably, if it was like 50 mastery, it would be really high on this list. But Seer just combos well with so many things, and its Omega Spin is insanely strong in combo with Magma. Like, if you cannot remove this thing quickly, it will shred your team slowly but surely. So Seer is a very reliable tank. The only problem is you gotta give it, buff it up a little bit to make sure it doesn't die too quick, whether that be with Earth or with some great augments. So Alfie is solid. I don't quite know where to put Alfie. I definitely think he's not as good as Umbre. You know what? Umbre's going to go up in S. Alfie's pretty solid. I haven't seen Sinelf see a lot of play. Sinelf's a really tricky one. I'm going to chuck it at the bottom of B. And Dualef, I'm going to chuck at the top of D. And I'm going to tell you why. So Alfie, Water Sion, even though it's cost 50, it does serious amounts of damage. If you can make sure a rogue doesn't go onto it, it can put its weight worth in gold, right? It can do that. Sinelf, great because it's water and Invoker, which is a really solid combo. It's just Invoker's really hard to pull off because they're so expensive, so it's really hard to get it running. But if you can, it's a really good addition to the team. The Dualef, because Invoker's already so expensive, you don't want Dualef. It's too hard to get off, and it needs to be in really specific positioning to be able to do its job. And that means that rogues can come onto it really quick. It's really hard to protect it, even when you put all the bulwarks and tanks and things behind it. Any deck with a good variation of things will be able to take it out quite easily. So the Fern line is a tricky one. I don't really know how to deal with this. They're definitely better than Adorius. I haven't seen Fernite see much play. Templar nature is quite awkward. To be honest, it really needs the wildfire to be really strong. Blazer Knight's definitely better than Fern. But if anyone doesn't know what this Omega does, is it casts a tornado that goes all across the map. It boosts attack speed for your team, reduces attack speed for their team, and stuns any enemies that it hits. The stun is not particularly long, but you can cancel a dual left beam with that thing. It is very helpful. The reason it's going so high on the list, even though it's not going higher than Familiar, probably go higher than Familiar, is because Wildfire is actually really solid, and so is Templar. Templar will steal the resistances from whatever it's attacking and add it to itself and your team. And so it can be really great if you let it live for a long time. It will benefit your team crazy amounts in the long run and really help them out. And it's really solid, especially for 90 drop. If this was 100, it'd be a bit worse, but 90 I think is solid. People who know me are going to know where I put this stuff. Okay, so the Laurel line is insane. Firstly, Bloom is bonkers. I've been using it a lot lately. It's so much fun. And Bloom Rogue is really good. It's a lot better than having the composite class. So a lot of the stage 2 Illuvials are quite good in that way, because if you can get them to take one of the really good composites and then one of the basic classes, you're going to be able to do a lot more with them. For example, you get 4 Rogue on Lure and have it critting often. But basically, it has like a 4-second charm, stun, damage dealing, all the rest of it. Like, it's an insane crowd control measure on their back line. If this thing is near multiple enemies, you're getting insane value from it, because it also becomes untargetable when it uses it. It's so strong. Lure is strong for the same way. If Lure was a bit cheaper, it would probably go even the highest on this list. It would be in every single deck, every single team, sorry. And Malur is only high up here because of Omega. Bloom's good, but it's losing so much from what I think is Vanguard. It's just losing a bit there, so I don't think it's that great. You know, I'm gonna put Malura a bit lower. Lolura and Lura fit into so many different teams comfortably, and Malura it needs to be in its own special team setup, right? I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller so that I make sure you can see it. Okay. So next up, we've got Fiery. It's just too squishy. It's going to the top of D. It's just too squishy. I've seen some people make Furiox work pretty well, but it's not that good. Scoriox is going to go pretty high up on this list. It's definitely better than Titanor. With the Magma and the Arcanite, Arcanite's one of the best synergies in the game, and you'll see me mention that later as well. But with the Magma and Arcanite, it's very, very good. And the attack speed buffs and all the augments support it really, really well. The only problem it has right now is it's kind of hard to deal with air comps because of the dodging and everything like that. But there are some ways kind of to help deal with it now, where certain things add clumsy and true sight and stuff like that. So that might be fixed a little bit, but it has some trouble with that since it relies so heavily on attack speed, and having a mixture of attacks and omegas is good. But it's really, really solid. Furiox, I probably should put this a little bit higher. It's probably better than Riptor. It's got Arcanite Fire. Again, two really great combos. There's not much more to it. Fury's so low because it's a little bit squishy, so it's very easy to take it out with like a rogue Ramfire Omega or a Dual F Beam or something like that. Furiox is a little bit harder to remove. Caterpie is surprisingly good. Now, it's going to the bottom of B. I'm going to chuck TNT up here and C4 is just above it. C4 with Invoker Granite. Granite, not that great. Invoker, really good. If this was Earth Invoker on TNT, it would be one of the best Illuvials in the game. Invoker is a really good synergy. It's just hard to pull off because everything's so expensive, but C4 being 55 mastery helps a lot, and it makes Invoker playable. But at the same time, this thing can actually deal serious damage, especially in the early game before people start building up resistances and stacking their synergies. C4 can do some serious damage, and it even does well in the back line because while it's casting, it reduces a lot of the incoming damage to it. And although it doesn't do this all the time, it's surprisingly helpful. So it's very good. Caterpie's solid. It's more so just to fill out the affinities in your team, but it's okay. It just doesn't do enough damage. So these three are interesting. These three are really interesting. I'm going to put Squeeze down at the bottom of C. I'm going to put Octius just above it. And I'm going to put a Fisto below Axodon. Now, with these two down here, they're just too expensive. Even though Shock is really great, Sion's really great, they just don't do enough damage. I don't know how else to put this. They just do not do enough damage. It's so hard. You got to stack so many augments on them to get them to work. A Fisto actually has the same problem. We have to stack insane amounts of augments on it to get it to work. But at the same time, you can pull that off. It's just, it has this problem where you could choose either a Fisto or Ramfire, and Ramfire just does it better. And a Fisto needs to really be protected. And that works great on something like an Alfie or a C-Forest where you have a lot of mastery left over to protect it. But on a Fisto, it's just too expensive to set it up properly. But with Ramfire, you get the Inferno affinity, so it doesn't matter if it's not fully set up. Inferno is just so much damage anyways. It's just insane. So make this a little bit smaller so we can see it all. Sweet. All right. So next up, we've got Mjol. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I hope I am. Mjol's going below Lura. It's actually really good. Even though it's 45 drop, it's something you want to trade out later. In the early game, it's surprisingly effective with the Fighter Air, which is a fantastic combo. With the dodging and the extra attack speed, it's just really solid because you get defensive capabilities and offensive. And the other two just aren't that good. I haven't seen them do a whole lot. Jotun's probably better than... It's not better than the birds. It's definitely better than Jocool. Jocool's going to have to go a lot lower. Because it's got Frost Fighter. I think the other way around, it might have worked a little bit better, where if it had air and then whatever the hell this is, Harbinger or something. I don't know. No, Bulwark. I don't know. Whatever Jotun is. Jotun does good damage, has decent bulk, but You just need to stack him with so many augments and other things to get his bulk to work, and he's not like an earth or anything like that. And Frost is a little bit underwhelming right now. I think if they made Frost better, it would be a bit of a different story. All right, next up we've got the water dudes that are healers. So we've got Ebb up here, Flood, and Geyser. Mystic, it feels really underwhelming. Now, Tsunami is okay, but yeah, it's just not that good. Geyser used to be really good. I don't know why he doesn't feel that good anymore. They're definitely better than Fiery. Actually, I can chuck them below Ram Fight. I think that's fine. They're definitely better than a lot of these other ones, but they're just not that good. They take a little while to cast. They're really easy to target out with rogues and all the rest of it. Ebb, on the other hand, is quite solid. At 45, it does pretty good healing, but it gives you those synergies you really need for some good water comps. I think for that reason, it can go decently high up. It's definitely not better than the Magma Core or Furiox, but it's pretty solid. I mean, it gets the job done. It's not that great, but it's pretty helpful for getting your affinities and your synergies up. So Lesser Monkia, Greater Monkia, and Exalted Monkia. I don't even know what they do. Which one are they? I'm going to really quickly check. All right, it's the cone damage. Lesser Monkia is really good. I think you would be surprised at how good this thing is. It's not as good as Atlas. It does the cone effect damage every third attack or whatever. This thing doesn't scale that well into late game, but the Fighter Earth combo is actually pretty incredible. And it's just very, very strong. Greater Monkia, these have the Slayer trait. I think is that Slayer really? Oh, it's Berserker, right. They have the Berserker trait where they get lots of attack speed and things like that. I've seen people use them, and with Mud and everything as well. I haven't used them myself, so I can't talk on them too much. They felt a little bit underwhelming. Maybe my teams just countered them decently. But at the same time, for the cost and the affinities and everything, it's pretty solid. I think Berserker is going to be great, especially later on in different formats. But for now, it's not that good. Lesser Apon's okay. Earth and Empath doesn't mix that great. Greater Apon I love because it's got Mystic. So 40 cost Mystic is a really good addition to things like Adorius, Geyser, or whatever else you want to equip. And Mystic, although it got nerfed a little bit, it's pretty decent. It's a little bit hard to play, but Greater Apon is really good because it actually, when it does its AoE Raw, it actually boosts the damage of everything that it hits, and it stuns all the enemies as well. So it's got a really good Omega. And then we've got Exalted Apon, which is Mud. Yeah, it's probably at the bottom here. I don't think it's that great. Lesser Grilla. A lot of people are honestly sleeping on Grilla. I haven't used Greater Grilla and Exalted Grilla a whole lot. I don't think they're that good. Again, they've been underwhelming against me. The 30 cost for Lesser Grilla is really solid. That thing leaving the clone, and then that clone being able to redirect something like a dual F beam is insane. Like if you position this well, and if you're really good at the game, you could leverage Grilla like you wouldn't believe. And that thing also targets the weakest enemy, I believe, or the lowest health enemy. Let me just double check. Yeah, with the lowest physical resistance. So it targets something it's going to hopefully be able to take out, and becomes briefly untargetable. It's just really, really good and leaves that statue behind. Do not sleep on Grilla. I'm just going to tell you that much. And the gyro line. All right. All right. Revo suffers the same fate as a bunch of these other things. Sorry, let me quit my Discord. Revo suffers the same thing. It's got Dust Rogue, just not that good. I mean, having the Rogue is nice, but Rota is just so much better at 30 cost Air Rogue. Very good combination. And then Gyro is very, very sweet too with Dust Slayer, which is a great combo because you can combo with Umbre quite nicely. But like when it lands and it does that AoE hit, it does surprising amounts of damage, but more importantly, it actually blinds everything it hits. So if you set this up right to go into their hypercarry setup with their Scoriox or Phosphorus or whatever it might be, Gyro can seriously mess it up and do good damage too. It is the only ranged rogue in the game, I believe. So you can have it, place it somewhere, and it will stay there. Which, as you know, some of the biggest abilities, biggest omegas in the game are actually target the furthest away enemy. So since Gyro doesn't go to the back of the board and then run somewhere, it stays there for at least for a while. You can really utilize that to your advantage. So Gyro is very, very good. Next up, we've got the Heady line. I haven't used Heady a whole lot. I think it's quite good though. Nature Bulwark is a pretty sweet combination, and it reduces incoming damage after it puts out its spore cloud, so that's quite good. Crunk is Wildfire Bulwark. I feel like it needs to be nature to be really doing well. I definitely think it's at the top of C though. You know what though? Crunk's actually a lot higher than Blotto. That's what I meant about Blotto. Crunk having Bulwark does help. It's actually quite good. I'm going to put it quite high up here. Wildfire is a very good synergy, simply put. And that's why it's going so high. And as a Bulwark, it's quite good and reducing incoming damage. It's just a great support for a tanky frontline in any team. So it's really versatile. The Cling line. The Cling line is good. The Sloth. I haven't used these myself. I've seen Null come out a lot. I actually really like Null. I'm going to put it above Seaforest and Tianti up in the A tier. Cling and Twine feel like they get outscaled really fast. I haven't seen a whole lot of people use Twine. I could be misjudging it there. But Null does really, really well. The Verdant is insane for healing. The Colossus is fantastic in combination with Titanor. At 75 cost is really good. Like if this thing was 60 cost, it might even be an S tier because it would just go in so many decks. But basically, Null has an AoE Omega that hits 2 of the furthest away enemies and then stuns them. Let me say that again. It hits 2 of the furthest away enemies, stuns them, and knocks up in an area. And so it's really great at slowing down your opponent and their hyper carries. The problem is that you can't build full tank and it just doesn't work. I've seen people try that so many times. But in a team that has some really great DPS, I can see Naldo putting in some serious work. The Slappin' line. Here we go. A lot of people are gonna attack me for this, and I'm gonna actually be trying to make a deck to make this work soon. Slashin', these 2 penguins, I've seen them get used. Water Rogue is pretty decent. It fits really nicely with Umbre. It's a shame that Slappin' isn't cheaper than it is. It's cost 40. Stabbin' again has the same problem as Jotun, where it wants to be a rogue at Rogue Frost, and instead of it's a water, whatever the hell that is, Vanguard or whatever, it just doesn't do enough. Slashin' is not bad simply because it's got really great resistances, really great Omega, and being a rogue really helps, and some really cool synergies. I think Frost is great on something like Slashin'. The problem is it just doesn't do enough damage. But maybe I haven't seen people with the right augments. I will be trying it more in the future. But yeah. Okay. Here we get to a really interesting one. So Caradulo, it's decent with the Toxic Bulwark, but as I said, Toxic is just not that good. Toxic, I'm sorry for all you guys trying to play Toxic all the time. I don't think I've lost a Toxic once, like the Toxic deck, ever since starting PvP, and I've played against it a lot. Caradulox actually has an insane Omega where it puts up Thorns and Taunts, and this can be really good against so many archetypes. I've been using Thorns a little bit lately on things like Lolura to destroy like fire decks, or do well against fire decks, destroy air, helpful against empaths and things as well. Thorns is really, really good, and I think Caradulox uses that well. And 55 cost is insane for this thing. This thing gets so tanky, it's insane. But the problem is that it's just not as good as Carablue. Carablue gets the same Omega, and with careful augments like Invulnerability and Indomitable and all the rest of it, you can make Carablue solid. And with the water synergy, it's great with like helping out a tanky setup and stuff like that. Carablue is really good. It's probably better than Gyro. I have to say it's better than Gyro. It's so good. Okay. I haven't seen Foe have much use. I just don't think it scales into the late game particularly well. Forest, on the other hand, really awesome. But Bloom Fighter is good. But why Phosphorus really shines is because it has Arcanite, which boosts its attack speed on Omega, and it casts really often. And Bloom is a really good synergy as well. Even though it's 100 cost, if this thing was 90 cost, it would be on every team. It would define the meta. Since it's 100 costs, it helps it be less prevalent right now. But it's insane. It's just a little bit hard to set up, but it's one of those rare 100 costs. Like you've got a Fisto and Ramfire and Umbre both need pretty decent augments to really get the most out of them. But Phosphorus can do surprisingly well without it. It just needs to cast one Omega with Arcanite set up, and it's solid. It's off to the races. Its synergies are just that good. All right. I'm not going to go through every single Atipo and Doer. Many of you probably expected that, and if you didn't, screw you, and you wanted me to do that, that's not happening. I'm going to go through one of each of the Lynxes as well. Okay. It's going to be tricky because they're all kind of blend together to me. The normal Lynx, I haven't seen anyone use it. At 35 cost, I'm assuming it's pretty good. It does pure damage from memory, so I think people should try it, but I don't really have anything to say. I don't think anyone's used it once. Relentless Lynx. This is the fighter Lynx. It typically does a lot of damage and then sometimes disarms and gains attack speed and that sort of stuff. They're pretty decent. They're actually one of the worst Lynxes out of them all. It's definitely high on C though. Nimble Lynx is the rogue Lynx. I've seen this used quite a bit. I was wrong. This might be the worst one. You want your rogues to be cheap because you want your big rogues to be like really good. Things like your Ramfire and your Gyro. You want like really big rogues to set up your team. And so you don't really have the mastery to be spending on 65 drop Lynx rogues. But at the same time, they're not bad, I'm sure. I mean, they're okay. They're just a bit too squishy, I think. The Stoic Lynxes are really good. Okay, I actually really like them. They're not as good as Caradulox and maybe Ramfy. They may be better than Ramfy. They tend to have a big AoE stun, which is surprisingly good. And there's some of their added benefits are insane, especially the Zephyr Lynx. The Zephyr Lynx gains Indomitable, I believe, or that might be the Terra Lynx. One of them gains Indomitable when it casts, which is really good. And then one of them also, like, I think the Zephyr Lynx also gains dodge chance and stuff. They're just really bulky, really tanky, and they do a good job of slowing down the opponent. They do their job well. The Virtuous Lynx are really fun. They're really fun to play. They're a little bit hard to predict. They all do slightly different things. I think the Fire one might boost damage of your team, and the Water one boosts energy regen. But the Nature one is where it's at. The Nature one boosts healing efficiency, heals based on missing health, and all the rest of it. It's just a really solid Lynx. And they have other benefits like or I'm thinking more of the Atipo. One of them might boost attack speed, but I'm not sure. And then we have the Arcane Links. I haven't seen a whole lot of them. Honestly, I think they're being a little bit slept on. I haven't used them heaps, but even the Water one, everything the attack passes through gets energy regen and stuff like that. And they have a pretty solid range with their wave attack, and it does a lot of damage. The only problem, like with all the Lynxes, is they're a little bit hard to fit into the team because they're just so expensive. And so you're prioritizing all of your low cost Water or Sion or whatever, and it's a bit hard to pull off the Lynxes. But if you can scale them into late game, these Sion Lynxes are really strong. They will, like you thought Flish did damage, go try out some of these Lynxes and you'll be surprised. All right, here we go. Doer. You're going straight into S tier. A lot of the Dokers have really great secondary effects. I believe the Fire one gains attack speed. The Earth one gains some defense. But like, even the Earth one, it disarms its opponent. It just stops it from attacking. But it doesn't do that on cast. It does that on the attacks afterwards. So you can end up disarming someone for like 5 seconds. Which if you put it in perspective, that's like 20% of the entire match. No, sorry, 10% of the entire match. They've been disarmed, and that's every time it casts. Right? So you can knock out something for 30% of the game whilst killing it and providing great synergies and all the rest of it. The Dokers are just really good. They do some good damage, and Fighter is one of the best synergies in the game. Groco is really solid too. You're going to see a lot of the T0s up here. Groco, the AoE stun is big, and they feel quite tanky too. The problem is some Grocos are better than others. Air and Earth are really great because they mend well with the defensiveness of Groco itself with the Bulwark. And then you'll find like your Fire and your Water Groco and your Earth Groco feel a little bit awkward. All the like nature one does is it heals itself. Not that helpful. And so your defensive Grocos are really great, and your other ones are a little bit awkward, so I wouldn't worry about them. Your Air Volante. So your Volante. Oh, this one's hard to place. Volante is really specific. I'm going to put it up here above Ramfy. It needs really good positioning to do its job. If it's attacking the wrong thing, it will be a wasted placement. But if you get it right, you can win games off of it. If you can get this thing to silence an Adorius before a cast or something like that, you can do really, really well. But it's kind of hard to set up, and it doesn't scale well because when you get later into the game, it's really easy to move everything around. And predicting that with your Volante is going to take a lot of work. So it's a little bit hard to play in that way. It's not as good as the other T0s. Flish. I'm going to put Flish just above Volante. Even though Flish does heaps of damage, unless your opponent's playing Earth, it just dies so fast. It's so hard to keep alive. It needs to be in a really specific spot to set up its beam right. It has to be paired with the right teams to get even more damage off. And just after all that, it doesn't scale particularly well. Once you're a team, your opponent has a large team and they're moving things around really often, you can't reliably take out the big targets or the big threats with your Flish. And it's going to die first every single time, I'm telling you. Any minor AoE thing is going to kill Flish in one shot. It just sucks. Atipo. So Empaths got nerfed a little bit in the latest patch as they had a bug that got adjusted and fixed. I don't think Atipo was as good as Archie. Atipo's okay. I know people are stacking them together. They just don't heal enough. They don't heal enough as your Empath Lynxes, to be honest. That's the big thing there. Now, they're cheap and they can help you get up that Empath synergy, but Empath is just not that good. It gets countered so easily by things like Air, which is running rampant right now. But at the same time, some of their added effects are quite cool and quite useful. I think the Air one grants attack speed and the Fire one burns enemies and grants attack damage. So they have some really great added effects for anything caught in their ability by allies. And that's one of the reasons it's going to go up the top there. So I hope you guys like my tier list. I hope you learned something. And you know a bit better what to use in your next team. You'll notice that Carablue is a really great tank. Lalura, a fantastic rogue. We've got 2 more rogues up here in Ramfire and Umbre. Phosphorus, incredible hyper carry. The Doka, really great early game. Pretty much you'll win round 1 and 2 with a lot of Doka pressure. And Gyro, another rogue that's at the back. Slayer with Umbre. And then you've got a lot of rogues and fighters and the occasional bulwark in here as well. There's not a whole lot of Sion up the top there. I think Sion's feeling a little bit weak right now. It's just hard to get off because everyone's so aggressive with the affinities and synergies. But if the meta shifts to a more of a late game meta, Sions are going to pop off and they're going to be the big one to watch out for. So yeah. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. Leave a comment down below if you disagree with any of my picks. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 that you think you're like, Alfie should be the top of S. It's ridiculous. It keeps knocking me out. I want to hear all of that feedback. Have a good day.